So we will continue, and today we'll finish.
We're
going to finish this mimer. This mimer on why are the candles on the left, Channukah candles on the left, and the mezuzah on the right. Why weren't they put in the same place? Obviously they represent two different things. The question is what? So what we ended with last time is that the light of the Torah comes down after you do a mitzvah. And that was the basic dynamic that he explained. The ner mitzvah.
You could ask the question, how come you don't like the Shabbos candles? You could ask, why don't you like the Shabbos candles on the left of the doorpost and the mezuzah on the right?
Shabbos candles have a different purpose altogether because you use them, so they need to be on the table. Right? Did the Rebbe light his candles on the table or not? According to Kabbalah, you're supposed to light them on the table.
Shalom Bayis.
Okay, so did the Rebbe do that or not?
No idea. I was never invited to the Rebbe's house.
So no. So by Chassidim, they don't follow this Kabbalistic minhag.
There's a very good reason why. Because you can knock them over, and the kids knock them over. And then everybody starts screaming and shouting at each other.
As far as I know, the Rebbetzin didn't light them on their table.
Where do you light your candles?
Next to
the table where you can see them.
Okay.
So
I don't know. But I've seen others who are makbid to put it on the table, to light them on the table.
Okay, well, Chacham Yisrael Nayim Barosh. You don't put yourself in a situation which you know is going to cause Agmas Nefesh.
Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. One of the simple ways to solve the problem, I don't know if it solves all the entire problem, but it solves part of the problem, is to keep the candelabra with the big one you put next to the table, and on the table you only put the little, the short, what do you call them? Heating candles, right? The ones that are just round and short. Those very hard to knock over. The only thing you can do with them is cover them by mistake, or something like that. But usually, if you have a big enough table, there's enough room in the middle so that nobody touches it. In any case, so the pasuk ki ner mitzvah, candle is likened, or the mitzvah is likened to a candle, v'torah or, and Torah is likened to light. So from that he learned that the mitzvah goes up from below to above, and the result are letters that come down from the will into the mind, and that's called light. And those are the words of Torah that come down. And that means bringing the letters down from the infinite. And we said from the infinite it's just a revelation. That's why the Torah never changes. Because the Torah is a revelation of godliness, and godliness is eternal. And godliness in the sense of the etzem, how Hashem is in and of himself, that's eternal, it's unchanging. So for that reason, the Torah shebichtav, the written Torah, is unchanging. What changes is our understanding of it, okay, but not the text itself. In any case, v'inyan, so now in the second paragraph, on 84. v'inyan she'arat or hanero al yedei sheyesh avir seviv ha'or. How do candles, why is it called that light comes down? What's the idea here? How does this work? So this is a general.
Up.
No, the light of the Torah we said comes down in the form of letters. The candle represents the mitzvah.
Okay.
A mitzvah that a person does. Any commandment that a person does is from below to above.
I don't know why you say the Torah comes down, because there's no up and down. Anyway, there's no heavens and Gehenna, like they talk about it being up and down. It's one world and another world.
It's a very interesting question. Obviously, it's understood symbolically. It's not understood as if somehow above the atmosphere, that's where heaven is. That's not the understanding. What we mean is above our consciousness, above our ability to perceive, where we can't perceive.
And yet it says in the Chumash that Moshe Rabbeinu was picked up by Hashem and lifted up above the earth.
You mean Avram?
Wasn't it Moshe?
No, Avram.
Was lifted up when there was a war, and he was...
That's how you can understand it.
Okay.
But the pshat doesn't mean that. It just means he took him outside and he showed him the stars. Doesn't mean they lifted him above the stars. Rashi says that. The pshat is that he took him outside of the tent. He was in a tent and he took him outside. In any case, whenever you point up and you say God is up, it's a symbolic gesture. It's not like physically. Because obviously Hashem is everywhere.
The kids in camp saying
Hashem
is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is everywhere. Right?
Yeah. And when you said everywhere, you just
you point yourself. You point to yourself, right?
Even in me,
right.
Somehow. So what's this idea of light coming down? So there's another way of explaining this that has a lot of meaning, especially when a person is doing some kavanos. I happened upon this when I was probably 20, probably even earlier, 18. And I started davening Shmona Esrei, seeing the letters. Close my eyes, and I see the letters forming in front of me, because I speak Hebrew natively, so it's not an issue. So I see the word, I say Baruch. So I see the Bet, Reish, Vav, Kaf appearing in front of me.
Okay, how'd you do that?
You close your eyes and you see it. It's not a big deal. You imagine it, obviously. It's not that it really happens. You just imagine it.
No, I thought you were doing some sort of, Kabbalistic trick to make the letters.
Okay. The Kabbalistic trick, as we said, is what the person has in mind, whether his will is there or not. So I came upon it from some sefer that I was reading, and I had this idea I should daven that way. I used to daven that way, and then as I learned more, I saw that there are all these intents that have to do with seeing letters forming out of the air. So I was once trying to explain this in a class, and I was in Toronto back then, and I tried to explain that that the atmosphere around us, the air around us, is ravui. It's saturated with godliness. And our job is to give it form, is to give it some kind of direction, some kind of meaning. And I felt that I thought I gave a good explanation. I don't remember what it was. But then the guy came up to me at the end of the class and he says, "This is a nice effort, but there's a much better example." So he said, "What?" So he said, "All you have to say is tell people, the air around you is full of ice cubes." I'm like, "Huh? What? What do you mean ice cubes? How do you see ice cubes around here?" He says, "Yeah, there's humidity in the air. And so it's saturated with," that was Toronto in the middle, I guess it's summer. It's all very humid. So the air is full of water. So you can just imagine that all the water would coagulate and form an ice cube. You could say there are ice cubes floating around here and I can't see them. In Yerushalayim in the winter, probably 10% humidity, not many ice cubes. But there's a few of them. You can make a few of them in every room. So I thought about that. Could you tell people, look, there's actually ice cubes floating around you? You don't like the example?
No.
I liked it. I thought it was very graphic. And it would help people understand, what do you mean that the air around you is saturated with something? Even when people say it's humid. So they feel the humidity a little bit in the air. But really what they mean is because I'm schwitzing. Because I'm sweating. That's why I feel the humidity. But if it wasn't sweating, who cares? I don't know. To say it in a nice way, people are very oblivious to their surroundings. They have no idea what's around them. Here he says something that I think every person knows already. For there to be light from a candle, there has to be air around the candle. Without the air around the candle will both be extinguished and it will not illuminate. There are two parts to this. The fact that it's extinguished, we all know, because fire needs oxygen to burn. What we don't hold by so much today is their theory. The theory in ancient science was that the quality of the air defines how much light gets through it. In a certain sense, we understand that, because if you go into a dark, musky room and you turn a flashlight on, you see the light beam getting stopped almost by call it the dust or whatever it is, if it's musty, so then you can't breathe, and there's no air. The air is not good, it's poor quality, and the light doesn't get through it. So what does that mean? It means that light is dependent on air, both to burn, both to appear, and also to propagate. התפשטות. ולכן אין כופין כלי על גבי הנר בשבת שלא יכבה, שמחמת כפיית הכלי מונע האוויר שסביב האור. And that's why you're not allowed to cover a flame on Shabbos, because by covering it with a vessel, you're extinguishing it, and that's forbidden, right? Why are you extinguishing it? Because you're taking away the air. והיינו, from this we learn, כי האוויר גורם להיות הארת אור הנר, לפי שהאוויר הוא אותיות אור י', שהאוויר הוא מקור האור. So the neat example of this, allusion to this in Hebrew, is that the word air, avir, which by the way is the same word in English, I don't know how they came to air, but it's the same word, avir. Another question you could ask is avir a Hebrew word? It strikes me that it's not.
Well, it's in the Chumash somewhere, no?
I don't remember it being in the Chumash. But if I remember it though, it doesn't matter. The question is whether the concordance remembers. Look in the concordance.
You're still looking at the books?
I still have books. And you look for avir, and what do you find? Nope, no such word. So, avir really and and air are both Greek, if I'm guessing correctly. Like aerodynamic. Right? That's like saying that something moves through air. Yeah, so if you look at the dictionary, no. Avir. So he says avir is a foreign word from Greek air, A-E-R. So it's not a Hebrew word.
Oh, okay. So therefore air came first and then avir came afterwards.
Yeah.
Which is why it's air in English.
Yeah. But now you have to ask, why
There's
did...
not very many Greek words in English.
What?
There's not very many Greek words in English. English
Oh
is,
no,
is Teutonic.
it's mostly Latin, but there's a lot of...
Teutonic.
What?
German.
That also, there's a lot of German influence, but there's a lot of Latin. I mean, the language that you learn in order to understand English correctly is Latin. Nobody learns German in order to understand. Yeah, okay.
Used to be a time you couldn't go to university till you did
Right, and Hebrew. So the question becomes, why is it that in Hebrew, the word air in Greek became avir? What bothers me about it? The Aleph, Yud, Reish, I understand. What I don't understand is the Vav. Why did they have to add a Vav into it? So, what's accepted in Kabbalah is very interesting, that really the word is or. And so even when you say air, in Greek, its origin really is in light in Hebrew, or. And that makes sense. Or and avir are close. And, or and air, and or. How it is in, however you say it in Greek, those are close. But to say it avir, that's interesting, because I would expect it to be aleph yud reish, that would have been enough for air. So why the vav?
Could have been someone like me who didn't know how to write properly.
So why the vav? So he says, Ki otiot or yud she'aviru mekor ha'or. Because really what they wanted, when the sages took this word in, they took this word in, because the sages already use avir ha'olam. There's a lot of avir in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, plenty of it. So when they they converted this word into Hebrew, they did something to it. So what did they do? He says they hinted that the word air, avir, is really or yud. They wanted to retain the or, so you would maybe see the origin, and they added the yud into it, and then it's close to. It could have just been called or ir or anything like that, but the avir was to retain the or and they add a yud. What's the idea? Ki hayud shebe'elem otiyot avir hu he'elem ha'or. The yud that's there is to imply that the light is concealed. That we're not talking about the regular light. And so their idea of light was, again, this is light that's not propagating, but rather light that is appearing out of the air. That's their understanding. That was the ancient understanding of light. That's why light depended on the air around the candle, because it wasn't propagating through it. It wasn't, the mustiness didn't stop the light. What they understood is that different qualities of air have different qualities of illumination. There's a hidden light within the air, and you bring it out. And that's what the candle really does. It brings it out. It brings out the light in the air. It's a very interesting idea. And you call it from being concealed to being revealed. What is this like? Just like the letters of the Torah, when they come down from the crown, they are just revealed. They don't propagate, they're revealed. So really what he's saying is like this, that you do a mitzvah, exercise your will to do a mitzvah, because by doing that you awaken the higher will, God's will. And when you awaken God's will, the result is letters that come down. And these letters that come down, they become the Torah. ולכן בעשיית המצוות שהן בבחינת העלה מלמטה למעלה למקורן ושורשן בבחינת אוויר אור יוד, גורם להאיר אור התורה. So he says, by doing a mitzvah, you're causing the light of the Torah to be coagulated out of the air, out of the surrounding air around you. Okay? So what you're doing is you're doing a mitzvah, and you're reaching the will above because of your will to do the mitzvah. So like connects with like. Okay? And the result is that the air around you, which is laden with letters, it coagulates. And letters are formed. Again, this is all a spiritual process, it's all a psychological process. But it's like that the more will you have, okay, the more letters come out. So what's an example? He doesn't bring here an example, unfortunately. I'll give an example. When David HaMelech when King David wanted to build the temple, Hashem told him, you can't. So he did the next best thing that he could. He made the foundations and he built the altar. That he was allowed to do. When he built the foundations, he had this very strong will. He had such a strong will to build the temple that Hashem had to send the prophet Nathan, to stop him. We talked about this once. Rashi says there, why does he have to send him first thing in the morning to stop David? Because he has such a strong will that if you come by the end of the morning, not the first thing in the morning, but the end of the morning, 9 a.m., he's going to be half done with building it already. He has such a strong need and will to do this that he's going to get going right away. So you have to stop him at the beginning of the day. You just have to stop him. So he did the next best thing, is he built the altar. When he built the altar, he was maybe overzealous. What did he do? He went down too far to the foundation. What came out? The whole abyss. Yeah. The whole abyss came out. The abyss, I don't know exactly what they hid there. Was it water main? I don't know what they hid. But whatever it was, water came out. And obviously this is again, I'm saying I don't know what happened in practice. It could be that in practice it really did hit some water. But the sages made this into a story that's about our psyche. That's how it's explained in Chassidus. It's very clear also. That when you have so much will, you may go too far down. You actually may go too far down. Meaning, you're so taken by the task at hand that you lose yourself in the abyss. And the abyss here is not being able to see around you. That's what it means to hit a water main. It's like you're not looking, you're not really here. You're so taken by what you want that you don't see reality anymore. You're in the abyss. And when the abyss burst forth, so it flooded everything. Really, what does that mean? It means that a person enters a state where he's not functioning normally. He's like so full of ideas, or so full of wants and will, and he's not. It's hard to communicate with him. So how did they stop the flooding? So they came up with an idea, and Achitophel came up with the idea, but Achitophel is basically a part of David in this story. And he says, in the same way that God allowed his name to be erased in order to purify a woman for her husband in the Sota, so in the same way, to save the world, you're also allowed to erase God's name. So they threw a shard of a vessel, of a clay vessel that had Hashem's name on it, into the water, and the abyss went back down. But it went back down too far. So they bring it back up, and there was no water in any of the wells anywhere. Meaning there was no flow of creativity anywhere. So to bring it back up, they said Shira Ma'alot. So in general, Shira Ma'alot, the 15 Shira Ma'alot, they're very good for creativity. If a person wants to be creative, say Shira Ma'alot. It's to bring the abyss further up or further down, depends on if you look from above or from below, it's the same idea. You're bringing it closer to your consciousness. So why did I say this whole story? What's the moral of this whole story? That when you have strong will, like David did, you find solutions to problems. You're mechadish Torah. To be mechadish Torah means that you have new ideas about how to do something. It's called seichel. That's what he's been talking about. When I do a mitzvah, the mitzvah allows me to tap into my creativity. And that's the will. And the will starts to bring down new ideas about how to actually go about doing what I want to do. Solutions, you might call them. So when I say the new Torah comes down, we mean Torah Sheba'al Peh. We mean oral Torah. One example is, does anybody invent, do we invent new mitzvos today? It depends.
You know those.
We know that the sages invented mitzvos, right? They invented certainly halachos. Where did they get them from? They got them from doing the mitzvah what they had before. Okay. So, for instance, they had Purim, they had Channukah, and new stuff came out. And what does this new stuff represent? It represents something more from your abyss, something more from your creativity. Right. So sometimes we do that. For instance, a kafos. Second a kafos. And some people say chi, some people say something else. Whatever they say. But second of kafos. No, not from the Arizal. What are you talking about? It was invented in 1970 something. And the reason it was invented was because in the Rizal it says something about mincha, that in mincha he also did a kafus. We don't do a kafus in mincha. So some people said, because we don't do a kafus in mincha, the whole kafus thing was pretty new in itself. It's probably only 800 years old. It was before their Rizal, but not by much. The Rizal added also in mincha. We don't do in mincha.
500 years ago.
The Rizal was 500 years ago, but the kafus is a little bit older. He wasn't the one who started it. In any case, So some people said the kavos that we do on Motzei Yom Tov is because of the Arizal, because we're supposed to do, but that wasn't the reason. The reason was very, I don't know what to call it, circumstantial, if you want. The reason was, it didn't even start in the Haredi world, it started in the Dati Leumi world, as far as I know. And one of the few things that they were Zocha to be Mechadish. And what happened was that in the yeshiva, in the Gush, there were Americans, and they paskin. You see how not Chabad this is, and they paskin that if a yeshiva bacher comes to Eretz Yisrael for the holidays, he has to keep 2 days.
That's the Mishnah Berurah.
So they kept 2 days. So they needed a kafos in the evening. So Rav Amital, I don't know who it was. He said, "Well, look, since you're doing a kafos anyway, we'll join you." How can you stand by seeing Jews dancing with the Torah and you're not going to dance? Who ever heard of such a thing? So they joined them. And they saw Vayiru Kitov. Thought it was good. And they started, and other people started doing this. Very quickly, they forgot that the reason was because there were these Bachrim that needed the second day of Yom Tov, and their Simchas Torah was the second day. And it became this minhag everywhere, that on Motzei Simchat Torah in Israel, which is Shmini Atzeres and Chutz La'aretz, you do a kafos again. Even if there are no Americans and no Englishmen and no anybody, you just do it. And it became this whole thing. So where did this come from? So it came from, what he's saying is it's a chidush, it's a new thing in Torah, and has some tzedakah, it has some justification. It's not the biggest justification in the world, but it's enough. And if it catches on, meaning it's a good solution to something, what did people need? I don't know what they needed, but you just spent 24 hours dancing. You need another 3 or 4 hours. What's the big deal? I don't understand it. So I think it solved the problem that people wanted to have a band. That was the main thing, that they wanted to have musical instruments. And there was something missing from the akafos during the day itself that they felt was missing. So I think that the solution was that we'll do it again, Motzei Simchas Torah. With David throwing this piece of clay into the abyss as a solution for the waters having come up too far and flooding the world is an example of solving a problem with the letters of Torah. And usually you solve it within the Torah itself, but sometimes it's a solution for the whole world. And sometimes it's the Rebbe thinking up shlichus as the most important thing that a Jew can do today. To see his life as an emissary, not see his life as serving himself. That is the key to mental health, to psychological health, to physical health, to everything, to parnasa, everything you want. So that type of solution is something that comes down. That's what we mean, that it comes down and it turns into letters. So it's from the air around him, and he gets the idea. When the idea enters into the mind, it becomes, instead of just light, it becomes letters. It becomes a solution that you can voice, that you can vocalize, you can write it out. People can understand what you see there. So that's what it means that it comes down. The solutions come down. Where do they come down from? They come from the Or Ein Sof, from the infinite light. Mm-hmm. And that's called והיינו כמו בחינת אותיות שלמעלה מהתורה, ושם הוא שורש מקור מצוות שמושרשו ברצון העליון, שלמעלה מהחוכמה בחינת דאורייתא מחוכמה. The fact that Torah comes out of wisdom, ולכן בעשיית המצוות שבחינת העלאה מלמטה למעלה. So after you do a mitzvah, which is elevating your will from below to above, into its root, בחינת אוויר אור יוד, גורם להאיר אור התורה. So you cause the light of the Torah to shine in the air. That's what we said, that the air reveals. That was the ancient science. Because in general, all the mitzvos are tzedakah. Right? That's how the Yerushalmi calls a mitzvah. A mitzvah stam in the Yerushalmi is tzedakah. It's giving charity. And the reason is because of this verse. That the verse says, it should be charity for us because we will keep all these mitzvos. And obviously this is not talking specifically about tzedakah, but that's what it's called. Keeping all the mitzvos are called tzedakah. וצדקה לדלים ואביונים היא המשכה והשפעה להחיות רוח שפלים. And when a person who is poor, what is he poor in? He's poor in da'at, he's poor in understanding. And he does a mitzvah, so that awakens above giving him what he needs also. What do I need? I'm poor in knowledge of the world, of life, of what Hashem wants from me. So if I awaken my will from below and do a mitzvah, I'm given the same back. And the mitzvah is called tzedakah, so Hashem gives me tzedakah. But Hashem's tzedakah is different than my tzedakah. My tzedakah is to do a mitzvah. Hashem's tzedakah is to give me understanding, give me knowledge, give me Torah. And Torah here again is in the widest sense. It's not just to understand the sugya. It could be that it's to understand some piece of Talmud. But it could be, like in David's case, it's how to solve an engineering problem. How do you get rid of this excess water? And what I receive from Hashem, the tzedakah that I receive from Hashem, that is the light of Torah. Because whether you say light or you say sustenance, it's all one, it all comes from above. That's why the sages said that if somebody says, all I have in my life is Torah, meaning I don't have to do mitzvos, I'm just an intellectual, I just study Torah. So he said, even Torah you don't have. Why? Because what you have is not real Torah. What you have is just regurgitating what was already done. But you have no new knowledge. You have no new understanding. There should be Torah with good deeds. Without good deeds, without good deeds, without the tzedakah, meaning the mitzvos, the real light of Torah doesn't shine in the person. That's what they meant, that even Torah he doesn't have. So it means that the Torah is never integrated into him. It never becomes something useful for him. It's just letters. And that's what the Zohar means when it says that ruach, that spirit, amshich ruach, it draws spirit, ve'aite ruach, and it brings spirit. Meaning, perush, ruach haynu b'chinat avir anal. Umitchela amshich makor b'chinat otiyot, ואחר כך הייתה הוא ממשיך המשכת אור אין זאת ברוך הוא בחוכמה ראשית גילוי אותיות להיות התורה אור. So there are two stages to it. When I awaken from below, the first thing that happens is amshich ruach. Amshich ruach is to make the air laden with letters. Ve'aite ruach, aite is like ata, like we said before, that ata is an ot. The letters themselves become the vehicles for the wisdom of the Ein Sof, the wisdom of God that enters into me. So now we come finally to the explanation. Why is the mezuzah on the right and the Channukah candles on the left? Because the mezuzah here represents all the mitzvot that we do. So it's put on the right. The right, what does the right do?
Why does mezuzah represent Why does the mezuzah represent all of the mitzvahs?
In this case it does. But there's also such a learning in Kiddushin, I think. That from mezuzah you learn all the mitzvahs. כי מזוזה היא בחינת העלה ממטה למעלה כמו בחינת המצוות. ועניין המזוזה הוא שכותבים פרשת שמע והיה עם שמוע, שכתוב שם אחד ואהבת בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, בחינת העלה. Normally you wouldn't think of something on the right as going from below to above, because the left is the one that goes from below to above. The right descends. The right descends and left ascends. But here he has to explain it differently. And he says, what's on the mezuzah? Why specifically the mezuzah? Could have been any other mitzvah to put there. Put a netruk there. I don't know. Take arvas aminim. It would make sense too, because in Sefer Maccabim it says that they rededicated the temple in Kislev, so they weren't able to bring to perform arvat aminim that year in the temple, so they did it on Channukah.
They did?
Okay, they went around the mizbeach with a kafus every day for 8 days.
Where does it say that?
Sefer Maccabim.
Right here.
There's one.
Which is written by who?
So that one's considered. Sorry, not Sevan Kavim. In Megillat Antiochus, I think. The one that's considered more rabbinic. There's a few different apocrypha, but the one that's considered most rabbinic, they bring the story. In any case, so he has to explain it a little bit differently. That the mezuzah here represents going from below to above. Where does it represent going from below to above? It does when it says that you shall serve Hashem b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol modecha, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all of your more. And that is from below to above. V'kovim b'petach habayit le'alot habayit. And so it gives another thing. That the mezuzah itself is to cause the entire house to be elevated. When you put a mezuzah on the front door, what you're doing is you're elevating the entire house. You're dedicating it to Hashem. Not
by coincidence, the Rebbe says, check your tefillin in your mezuzahs.
Okay. וכל אשר בו, כל רכושו וקניינו בכל התיבות להיות בטלים לאהבת השם בכל מאודך ובכל ממונך. And you put it in the front of the house, in the entranceway to the entire house, because it represents that all your property, everything that's inside, is dedicated to Hashem. That's like lifting it. That's like elevating it. ולכן קובעים המזוזה בימין, כי בימינו תחבקני כאדם מחובק את חברו, שמקרבו אצלו, כך נמשך ימין מקרבת לעלות אליו יתברך, כל הבא לקרב אליו יתברך. So he says like this. So really it's on the right, because it's like Hashem embracing you. Because the right is the hand with which we embrace. And the left only supports the head, but the right embraces the entire body. So he's saying it's like Hashem is pulling you up to Him. But that's a little bit different than what he said before. He wanted to say that it's we awakening. And all the mitzvahs are us awakening. In any case, אבל נר חנוכה המשכת אור התורה. But the Channukah candle is the opposite. The Channukah candle is the revelation of the light of the Torah, meaning the letters of the Torah that are coming down from the will. Now, to really understand this, you saw that I was kvetching it. It doesn't work so well. Because again, the right axis is the one that descends, and the left axis is the one that goes up. So what are you telling me, Alter Rebbe? What are you telling me? So I think what he's really telling us is something else. He just didn't want to say it in length. I think, and in the beer it comes out a little bit more. That we talked about that there are two different types of work in the world. There is seeing the world as just a revelation of godliness. We call that He'elem v'gilui. And there is seeing the world as a world of changes and transformations. And that's the world of hard work. The world of mitzvos, etzem v'itpashtut, propagation. So, which one of the two, the Ner Chanukah or the mezuzah, which one is just revelation, and which one is hard work? Okay? So, we understand right away that the mezuzah is talking about hard work. To love Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul, that's hard work. That means changing. That means transformation. That means a mitzvah. A mitzvah that actually transforms and does something to the world. The Ner Chanukah, the Chanukah candle, is not about that. The Chanukah candle you're not allowed to use.
Right.
You don't use it. You can't write by it. You can't see anything by it. You can't use the light. If you can't use the light, what is the light? The light is just a light of revelation.
Too holy to be.
Good. It's a light of revelation. It's just revealing godliness. You're not meant to turn it into something. You're not meant to use it. You can't cook by it. You can't do anything with it. Okay? The Shabbos candles that we mentioned in the beginning, they're certainly something that you do with. Okay? You use the light. It's meant for being used. You can't move it. That's because it's Shabbos. But the point is to use the light, to have light for the house. So really what he's saying is, I think this is what he means, that the right here, the mezuzah, represents all your work. And that's the Yad Yamin, the strong hand. Okay, our right is strong. That's why it embraces. It's the one that does the work. The left hand is Yad Tashkoach. It's a weak hand. But don't think that weak means it doesn't do anything. It does something else. It reveals. That's all it's meant to do. It's meant to see godliness. That's what it's meant to do. So, how does this work? כי היוונים רצו להשכיחם תורתך ולכן הוא משמאל. The Chanukah candle itself was enacted as a mitzvah, was made into a commandment by the sages in order to commemorate the fact that the Greeks wanted to do what? They didn't want to annihilate the Jewish people. They didn't want us to stop working. What they wanted to annihilate was the Torah. They wanted to annihilate the light. Couldn't do it, but no revelation of godliness here. If you want to do it, study it like mathematics. There's no revelation of godliness here. כי מימנו יש דת לעמו, שהתורה נמשלה על האש כנודע, ובפרט שעיקר מצוות נר חנוכה להאיר בחוץ ברשות הרבים, מבחינת רבים היינו תורא דפירודה, מבחינת שבע האומות. So here he says this even more clearly. He says the whole point of the Chanukah candle is to be lit outside. We light it inside because of the exile. But in general, it was supposed to be lit outside. It was supposed to be a sign for everybody that the Torah is one and Hashem is one and so on and so on and so on. And this was all to combat the feelings of separateness. And again, when we talked about this last week, separateness means that I'm in a state of feeling change in the world. The more I feel separate, the more I feel the change. The more I feel the change, the more I feel the separation. Separation from God. That's what causes separation. Tura de Peruda. The mountains that are separated from one another. You can't jump from one peak to the other because they're two different things altogether. Okay? So these mountains, reality, people, everything I look at with my perspective of change is separate. There's no connection between them. How can you say Hashem is one? You can't say Hashem. So that's what the Chanukah candle comes to say. That don't look at this as change. Don't look at this as reality that's changed. It's a fixed reality. And really everything is connected. Really everything is one. That's what the Chanukah candle wants to reveal. שגם שם יאיר אור השם וקדושתו, שלא יהיה העלם והסתר, so that Hashem is not concealed, but rather revealed. And remember, that was the whole thing we talked about last week. That the more I'm in the consciousness of change in the world, the more disconnected I am from Hashem. It's not that Hashem doesn't want this. He wants this, because otherwise it won't be free will. You won't have a duty in the world. He wants you to also feel separate. Not entirely, but he wants you to have consciousness that things change, that you're doing something. That consciousness is the consciousness of doing mitzvot, of doing commandments. But there's the consciousness of the Chanukah candle, which is not meant to be a mitzvah in that sense, that I'm doing something. The last thing you're supposed to do when you light the Chanukah candles is feel that you did something. How do we describe it? Ad sheteheh shalhevet olah me'eleh. You're supposed to light them in such a way that the flame rises by itself. Or you should at least feel that you didn't do anything here. Okay? You didn't do anything. That's the essence of the Chanukah candles. כמו שהיה בימי חשמונאי שרצו יבינם להשכיחם תורתך, וכשגברה מלכות בית חשמונאי תקנו להמשיך אור תורה גם במקום הרבים תורי דפרודה. So that's why, since the Greeks battled the Torah, and the Torah again is revelation, unchanging, Hashem is just one, there's no world, there's only godliness. That's what the Greeks wanted to fight against. And so when we succeeded in defeating them, the commandment was to light the Chanukah candles outside, to ensure that there is a feeling that God is one outside also, not just in me, but outside, meaning there's no real separation between people, there's no real difference, everything is unified, everything is one. So no?
I got lost.
You got lost.
Say it again. Say the last bit again. I lost the train.
The Chanukah candle is not a mitzvah in the regular sense. Every mitzvah in the regular sense is supposed to be hard work. A mitzvah says you did something. You changed something in the world. You took a cow and you made it into tefillin. It's hard work. You woke up in the morning and you washed your hands. You have to bring the water from the well. You're doing stuff. Something is happening. The purpose of the mitzvah is to say, I am changing the world into a better place through my actions. I'm sanctifying it. It's beautiful. Okay? It's more like I'm purifying it rather than sanctifying it. The Chanukah candle is not meant to do that. It's not a mitzvah in that sense. It's not like that. What is it like? It's the consciousness that everything here is one. It's simply to see, it's like to see a fixed static reality, like we talked about last week. If I'm able to see, to take out all my judgments, everything, and just see things for what they are, frozen even, if I need to freeze it for a second, like we talked about that guy in the muscle. If I can freeze it and see it as godliness, that's what the Channukah candle is meant to do, because it's not meant to be used. It's not changing anything in the world. All it's doing is it's changing my consciousness. I'm looking at the world like a tzaddik looks at the world. Everything is godliness, everything is good.
But you're still lighting up the world.
And we said that you don't need the light.
Shem doesn't need the light.
Nobody
The
needs the
world
light.
needs the light.
The light here is the spiritual light. It's not the physical light. It's not the physical light in and of itself. What we're looking for is for the consciousness to change to such a degree that even when you're lighting the candles, you don't feel like you're doing anything. That's the whole trick with Channukah candles. Can you light them without feeling yourself lighting them? Meaning, can you light them and then open your eyes and wow, suddenly they're all lit and I didn't do anything? If you have to close your eyes and open your eyes, you're fooling yourself. But if you can do it with your eyes wide open, and you can just see it as godliness being revealed, meaning the fact that these candles are now being lit is not me. It's Hashem lighting the candles. That's called Shalhevet Olam Eleh. That the flame rises by itself. Okay? It's like seeing the whole world. I didn't make this world. I didn't even make my life. And the Channukah candles say, look at everything as is, at face value. This is what Hashem is revealing right now in the world. It's got nothing to do with what you did 2 hours ago, 2 weeks ago, or 2 years ago, or 20 years ago. It's just another picture in the reel, in the film reel. There's another picture. He drew this picture, that picture, that picture. Now it's come time for this picture to be in front of the projector, so that's what you're seeing. That's what the Channukah candles do. He says there is the right, which is the active side, the strong hand, and the weak hand is to say passively, to accept everything passively. It just is what it is.
It's very deep.
We said this on Sunday, you don't remember?
Yeah, but it's still very deep. There's something to take a lot of thinking about.
Okay, I still have to find a good way to explain what does it mean that you look at something and there's no change. It's just what you see. I thought another example would be like when you go to the museum and you look at a picture in the museum. So what do you see? Even if the picture is very, very alive, like it's a picture of a battle or something like that, you wouldn't be judgmental of the people in the picture.
They're not real.
Because they're not, because it's not real. They're not real people. They're not autonomous. They're drawn the way that Hashem drew them. So the world also, it's drawn the way Hashem drew it right now.
Now you're taking away free choice.
Nachon. We said it's a paradox. It's a paradox. The Channukah candles are meant to give you the other side of the paradox, the part that the Greeks couldn't understand. For the Greeks, everything was changed. We're talking about this Heraclitus, that you can't step into the same river twice, and all his different aphorisms about change. And everything is about change. He said science today is only about change. It's very little about science. Even species from Darwin you can't see as just what they are. You have to talk about how they change. Why do you have to talk about how they change? Because that's how modern science woke up. When Galileo figured out that we can measure change. It's very interesting that I looked this up in the middle of the week, that by Aristotle, for something to be static was a higher level than for it to be changing. So he said, when you look at the numbers associated with an object, number is an accident for him. But the accident is only the numbers that change. For instance, how much does he weigh? Why? Because it could change. Tomorrow he'll eat more, he'll weigh some more. He'll eat less, he'll weigh less. But there are numbers that are intrinsic. Okay? There are numbers that are more essential. They don't change. So for instance, having 2 feet, two hands, 2 eyes, those are intrinsic numbers. They don't change. So they had more weight for him than accidental features that were quantitative. So this is a whole topic in and of itself. But it's to say basically that what the Greeks couldn't handle was a static picture of reality, the eternal picture of reality.
Well, they didn't let the Shemis forever.
No. That didn't work too well for them. They had to have the world be eternal and God to be eternal. But God there, they meant, we talked about this, that's the God of change, the unmoved mover. He's eternal, so therefore he's unmoved, but he's always moving things. But in the chiddush of Yiddishkeit was, Avram's chiddush was, that he saw reality as unchanging. To see that Hashem is not causing movement. He's just bringing out, he's just revealing something. Not with change. There's no connection between one moment and the next. In that sense. So this needs more clarification. Somebody said here, it's like looking at a mirror. It's not your image in the mirror, just a mirror. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. That's a very good example, because when I move my hand, that's change. But when the mirror shows me moving my hand, it wasn't caused by, it's not change in that sense. It's just showing what there is. And it's almost looking through a mirror. Yeah. Very good.